Good morning or good afternoon, Tigers. Today we'll be watching a quizzette video on quizzette 714. As always, please make sure that you write your last name, comma, first name, today's date, someday in November. And today I'm going to say that I'm a blue tiger. Remember to circle the appropriate class color. Number one, I'm probably going to say Monday, but you guys know that I mean Tuesday. So number one on each day is going to ask you if the equation that they give you is a proportion. Now, we've already learned about equality. We've already learned how to manipulate our fractions or our ratios and how to find if they're proportional. But I'm also teaching you cross multiplication because sometimes that's going to be one of the only things left for you to do, or you're going to forget the other way. And this might be a little easier for you. So you can only cross multiply when there's an equal sign between the ratios or between the fractions. You can only cross multiply when there's an equal sign. Do not cross multiply when you're subtracting or adding fractions. You already know the rules for that. Or multiplying or dividing. Completely different. Go ahead and link the opposite numbers. Some people call this the butterfly method, but I'm not going to use that bad word. We're just going to say cross multiplication. 5x times 10. 5 times 10 is 50. Keep the variable. 50x equals 9 times 6. You already know that. 54. Make sure you keep the variable. 54x. And we're just kind of put a question mark on top of this equal sign. Because really we're trying to see if they're equal. We're not saying that they're equal right away. So just by reading this statement, 50x equals 54x, is that true or is that false? Clearly, that's false. They're not equal. So this does not form a proportion. This equation does not form a proportion. I want you to state that. This equation does not form a proportion. Remember, proportionality has everything to do with equality. Number two. Does the following equation form a proportion? Oh, it's asking you the same thing. Let's go ahead and cross multiply. Well, the first thing you can do is you can check to see if you can manipulate the first fraction or the first ratio to get you the second ratio. Can you multiply 5x and 5 by any other number to get you 11x or 11? You could probably find the decimal, but I don't want you to do that much work. I just want you to cross multiply. And let's just check real quick. So 5 times 11x is 55x. And we're trying to see if it's equal. So that's why you're putting that question mark above the equal sign. And then we have 5x times 11, which is 55x. Now read that statement to yourself and ask yourself, is that equal? 55x equals 55x. Yes, that is true. That is a true statement. So this equation does form a proportion. Now, I'm writing really sloppy, but you guys can write a lot neater than that and try to make it fit in that little box. All right, number two. Actually, it's number 3. You have a recipe that calls for 2 cups of flour to make 3 dozen cookies. Now, I could read this entire question, but I want to jump the gun, and I already want to write my first ratio that they gave me. So my first ratio that they gave me is 2 cups of flour to make 3 dozen cookies. 2 cups of flour to make 3 dozen cookies. How much is in a dozen? If you heard that in the quizzette video, Charles yelled it out, and it's 12. So if I have 2 cups of flour, and I have 3 dozen cookies, how many cookies do I have in total? Well, Charles already told us there's 12 dozen cookies. 3 times 12, we know because we've done a million multiplication charts in here. 36 cookies. I was going to put 36 dozens. So we have 36 cookies for how many cups of flour? 2 cups of flour. Now, the question, we haven't even read the question yet, but why don't we find the unit rate? Just find the unit rate. Remember, the unit rate is the cost or the quantity for 1. So if we have 2 cups of flour, How many cookies do we have in 1 cup of flour? 1 cup. 1 cup of flour. So I'm just going to write it. 1 cup of flour. Well, if I'm doing half the amount that's given, which is 2 cups, half of that is 1 cup. What's half of 36 cookies? 18 cookies. If you already wrote that, good job. All right, now let's read the rest of the question. So I'm going to read past this highlighting right here. So it says, your friend, well, I'm going to start from the beginning. You have a recipe that calls for 2 cups of flour to make 3 dozen cookies. Your friend has a cookie recipe that calls for 3 cups of flour to make 60 cookies. Are the constants of proportionality the same for the 2 recipes? Are the recipes for the same cookie? How do you know? Okay, so constants of proportionality. This is the first time I think you guys see that actually written out. I've mentioned it a couple of times. In 8th grade, that right there is not going to be heard. You're going to hear the word slope. Slope. Now, we did learn about unit rate. Unit rate equals constant of proportionality, and that equals slope. Like, it's the same thing. If it comes down to definitions, I guess they're a little different, but when it comes down to the math, unit rate, constant proportionality, and slope are all the same thing. So we're going to underline that, and we're going to define it later on, hopefully today. If not, we'll get to it tomorrow. So go ahead and highlight or underline constants of proportionality. Now, I want you to remember the quizettes that we've done before. When we are finding the unit rate, we're reducing the ratios to the smallest fraction possible. And if they're all the same number, that means that their constant of proportionality is that number. So, for example, last week we had a table and it was like they all equaled 3 over 1, 3 over 1, 3 over 1, 3 over 1. The constant of proportionality in that case would be 3 over 1. The rate in that table would also be 3 over 1, or 3 yards for, I don't know, 1 second. And then your slope, when you're in 8th grade, I'll teach you a little bit more about that when we're graphing them, would be 3 over 1. You rise 3, you run 1. Okay, so constant of proportionality. The same for the 2 recipes. Are the recipes for the same cookie? How do you know? So let's look at the second ratio. The second ratio they give us is 3 cups of flour to 60 cookies. So let's write that on the side. Let's write it in a different color. I'm going to use green. So 3 cups for how many cookies? 60 cookies. All right, let's find the unit rate. I'm going to divide 3 cups by 3 to get me the amount for 1 cup. So if I divide this by 3, I have to divide 60 cookies into 3 groups as well to find the unit rate. So here I know this gets me 1 cup of flour to 3 groups of 60 cookies. 3 groups of 60 cookies. Think of money. If you have $60 and you're trying to divide it into 3 parts, you have $20. So in this case, 20 cookies. So the unit rate for the second batch is 1 cup for 20 cookies, and the unit rate, or the constant of proportionality in this case, for the first rate or ratio is 1 cup of flour for 18 cookies. Do they have the same constants of proportionality or same unit rates? No, they do not. Are the recipes for the same cookie? Probably not, because the recipes give you different quantities, so it's probably not the same cookie. That's how I know, because their unit rates are different. So I'm going to take a second to write that sentence. Once I write it, you can write it yourself. Go ahead and pause the video. It's a little too long, so I don't want YouTube to not upload my video. All right, number 4. It says the table shows the amount of money raised based on the number of tickets sold for a charity concert. Does the table show a constant of proportionality? If so, what is the constant of proportionality for this situation? On the bottom of this table, you will see that it says equation. I forgot to ask it on the top. I actually revised this question from last year. We are also going to be writing the equation once we find the constant of proportionality. So make sure you underline it, highlight it, circle it, whatever it is that you need to do. You need to remember to write the equation at the end of the table. Okay, as always, I told you write your ratios in terms of y to x. The first rate that's given to you is your x. The second rate that's given to you is your y. when we write our ratio, we write them from y to x. So my first ratio is $3,600 of the money raised meant that they sold 160 tickets. Now, if I want to find the unit rate or the constant of proportionality or the slope of this, I'm simply going to divide. That's the operation when we have ratios and we have fractions. 3,600. I think I keep saying 360. 3,600 divided by 160. Now, I'm not going to sit there and compute that at the top of my head because I can't think right now. I'm going to use a calculator. You guys are allowed to use calculators when the numbers are greater than 13. All right, so the cost or the unit price, so for one ticket, it is $22.50. $22.50. Now, if they were to sell 500 tickets, they raised $11,250. So again, I'm going to use my calculator for that. And the unit price and the slope, the constant of proportionality, is again $22.50. Now some students, they say, oh, that's going to be equal to the same number every single time. Not always. They try to trick you. They'll give you like 5 terms, and then the last term will be the one that they throw off. So trust me, you want to check every single one. So my last ratio, or my last rate, is 16,875 to 750 tickets sold. And the unit rate in this case is, again, $22.50. So this table is proportional. They don't get less money with more tickets that they sell. It's the same. Each ticket is going to cost $22.50 regardless of how many people show up according to this chart for this charity fundraiser. Now the equation for constant proportionality, I know you haven't learned it, but the equation is y equals mx, where m is the COP, the constant of proportionality. Go ahead and write this down. The unit rate, or in some cases, slope, aka 8th grade, aka the last month of 7th grade, because that's all I teach you the last month. So this is probably going to be the hardest thing I teach you, and I'm just kidding. This is probably going to be the easiest thing I ever teach you. So y equals mx. Once you find the constant of proportionality, once you find the unit rate of a table, this is what you do. You plug it into the equation. Y equals, instead of writing m, you write the constant of proportionality, which in this case is 22.5 or 22.50. I could put 50. And then write your x next to it. That's your equation. That's your equation. Now, I'm going to teach you how to graph this. But you need to know how to write the equation because that's the standard. The standard for 7th grade is not to graph it. The standard for 7th grade is just to learn how to write an equation. Boom. Questions, comments, concerns? Ask me after the video. All right, Tigers, every day is pretty consistent. You have a table. Oh, well, for number 3, it's flipped. Number 3 and number 4 is flipped for Wednesday. And then Thursday and Friday, it's going to require you to do a little bit more thinking and problem solving on number 4 on Thursday and Friday. Have a nice week.